Ever wonder why multi-million-dollar companies suddenly declare bankruptcy or announce downsizing, despite having reams of rigorous, high-performing procedures and a highly skilled workforce? Sometimes it's because the rules stayed the same, but the world changed. Welcome back to this series on the 17 principles of the COSO Internal Control Integrated Framework, where we break down each principle in plain language and connect it to real business, risk, audit, and governance situations. In this clip, we're looking at Principle 9, which sits under the risk assessment component. Principle 9 states, identifies and analyzes changes that could significantly impact the system of internal control. In essence, it highlights that risk assessment can never be a static, once-a-year checklist. It must be a continuous process of looking ahead. In plain language, this means keep your eyes on the road and adapt to the changing landscape. The rules and tools that kept us safe yesterday might leave us completely exposed tomorrow. Think of internal controls as perishable assets. If your company switches to a new software, moves to hybrid work, or introduces AI, the old checks and balances might not cut it anymore. If you don't pause to reevaluate your safety nets during these transitions, they might fail. Principle 9 is under the risk assessment component. Within this component, it serves as the dynamic radar and refresh mechanism for the entire risk ecosystem. It links intimately with Principle 6 because management must first clearly define its operational and financial goals before it can understand what external changes threaten them. It acts as a kinetic disruptor to Principle 7, which looks at risks under a steady state, by forcing the organization to constantly update its general risk registers as parameters shift. Finally, it connects to Principle 8 regarding fraud risk because massive organizational changes, like rapid scaling or layoffs, alter human incentives and create new, unmonitored loopholes for deception. The three COSO objectives, operations, reporting, and compliance, are the three categories that organizational objectives typically fit into. Let's look at how this principle applies across such objectives. For operational objectives, which focus on efficiency and core business health, Principle 9 applies whenever an organization alters its physical workflows or infrastructure. For example, if a company automates its logistics network, management must analyze the change immediately to ensure the upgrade doesn't accidentally introduce processing bottlenecks or single point of failure vulnerabilities. For reporting objectives, which target the reliability and transparency of data, this principle ensures that the pipeline feeding your internal and external metrics remains uncorrupted when accounting standards evolve or when decentralized technologies are adopted. It forces the remapping of transaction trails during major system migrations to maintain data integrity. For compliance objectives, which demand strict adherence to laws, Principle 9 acts as an early warning mechanism for shifting regulations such as cross-border trade frictions or localized environmental rules. It demands that control mechanisms adapt to avoid heavy statutory penalties or lawsuits. Weaknesses in this area cause internal controls to be treated as a static checklist, meaning that the system completely fractures during periods of transformation or market volatility. This manifests as control obsolescence, where old activities remain operational on paper but lose practical utility, like running physical inventory counts when the company shifts to automated dropshipping. Psychologically, it fosters anchoring bias and the normalization of deviance, where employees notice legacy controls no longer fit current workflows and invent unauthorized workarounds to bypass the friction. This might appear to management as efficiency and stability, but that misinterpretation might expose the company to compliance breaches, data leaks, and possible financial restatements. Or the team fails to acknowledge the change, continuing outdated processes because we've always done it that way. Controls related to this principle might be embedded straight into organizational workflows, establishing a formal change management policy that acts as a mandatory gatekeeping protocol requiring a signed cross-functional risk assessment before any core system upgrade or strategy shift can go live. Deploying automated IT system change controls within the deployment pipeline that block code promotion to production without automated validation that security baselines are maintained. Setting up regulatory horizon scanning requirements that obligate legal teams to cross-reference and map impending statutory shifts to operational policies months before enactment. Key risk indicator alerts on dashboards to track operational markers like spikes in employee turnover or post-merger data sync errors, which automatically trigger a review of controls. A mandatory post-implementation audit 90 days after a major restructuring or tech shift to verify new controls are operating as designed. Periodic checks for unauthorized changes prevent missed modifications building up to a system that doesn't function as expected. Maintaining documented business continuity and business rollback playbooks that allow the company to revert to a safe operational baseline if a major deployment breaks internal controls. Deploying a dedicated control remediation task force when an organizational change results in flaws in existing protocols to re-engineer procedures and re-establish proper flow and segregation of duties. And as a risk transfer activity, maintaining dynamic transactional and business interruption insurance policies such as representations and warranties insurance during M&A to cover financial losses while new control frameworks are being stabilized. An organization that does this well might have a treasure trove of dynamic evidence rather than static logs. An auditor might see integrated change management artifacts showing risk assessments signed off before major rollouts, live, dynamic risk registers with frequent updates and historical versions, cross-functional committee meeting minutes proving real-time executive debates about environmental shifts. Evidence might also include logs that demonstrate continuous reporting, training records, and organizational document change history. For management, this principle means risk management cannot be a delegated, siloed task. They must actively break down organizational walls to ensure business strategists openly talk with risk and compliance teams. Management needs to proactively build change triggers directly into product lifecycles and corporate governance models so that change automatically initiates an internal control review. For auditors, Principle 9 means shifting completely away from simple backward-looking testing towards real-time agile auditing. Internal audit must think critically and ask, are we auditing the risks of yesterday or the operational realities of today? If the firm rolls out a major digital transformation, old documentation might become useless. Auditors must be at the table during key strategic shifts to evaluate if the first and second lines of defense are communicating clearly as realities change on the ground. For the board, this principle directly underpins their fiduciary duty of care and shifts their oversight from historical reviews to active forward-looking governance. To ensure it's applied appropriately, the board should routinely challenge management during meetings by asking what major changes have occurred in our operational environment this quarter and how exactly have our internal controls evolved to match those new risks. The key takeaway is that internal controls are not monumentally carved in stone. They're living, breathing mechanisms that must adapt as fast as the business environment does, or they risk becoming obsolete. Thanks for joining me in this exploration of COSO ICIF Principle 9. Leave a comment below and click the like button if you found this useful, and subscribe to my channel for more videos on this topic. The next video is going to look at Principle 10, where we move into the control activities component to look at how organizations design the actual policies and procedures to mitigate the risks already identified.